vision is to be the model for urban education in the country. I believe that our leadership team, from the building level all the way up to the superintendent's office, takes that vision very seriously. And our expectation is that we will be the best. We don't have all the answers right now, but on some of those most persistent problems, we haven't found anyone else who has those answers around the country. And so what better place than Des Moines to get those things figured out?
When they hear Iowa, they don't hear urban. We presented at a national conference last year, and the first thing we talked about were Field of Dreams, all the different movies that are set in Iowa, Twister, tornadoes, things like that. They're picturing farm fields and dirt roads. Because there's this perception of Iowa that is nowhere consistent with Des Moines. People are always surprised to discover that 60% of our students don't identify as white. And so when you think about the state, our demographics in Des Moines are very different than what you might think of.
What has been consistent, at least in Des Moines, has been a steady growth in the diversity of our student population. We boast students from 112 different countries of birth, speaking almost 200 different languages. We've been a majority-minority district now for, I think, 6 years, 5 or 6 years.
The main idea is
our student dynamics changed in the 14 years I was on the school board tremendously. When I first got on the school board, it was less than 50% free and reduced lunch. We had less than 2,000 English language learners. And when I got off, it was 76% free and reduced lunch and over 7,000 English language learners. So the dynamics of our student population changed dramatically.
The most challenging part of my job would be along the lines of equity and cultural proficiency. A good percentage of our employees don't live within the limits of the city of Des Moines. If you think about the vast majority of our teachers coming from the state of Iowa, and you think about the demographic makeup of Iowa, it's very different than the student population that we serve. And so because that is our reality, we need to have a very clear approach to support the growth and development of our teachers so that they can effectively serve our kids.
St. Petersburg, Russia. Raise your hand if you had St. Petersburg, Russia. Why couldn't I just put Russia? Tell your group why we can't just put Russia.
because that's normal thing.
Not only are we working as a system of educators across the country to create high standards of achievement for students, we're also working towards ensuring that we have processes and deliberate practices in place to create equitable opportunities and outcomes for students to achieve at high standards. And in Des Moines, that is absolutely our focus, that is absolutely the lens by which we view our roles. The challenge is knowing that we're not there yet and trying to maintain that enthusiasm and that excitement for the role, knowing that we're still not there, we're still not equitably serving all students, staff, and families. The goal is to get there and to absolutely achieve that.
I think that we're tackling issues that a lot of districts either are afraid to tackle or don't know how to approach it, frankly, around equity. We've reduced the variance dramatically. I know when I started, even walking into a school on the east side, the experience for a student was very different than walking into a school on the west side, for example.
The Wallace Foundation is all about improving results for the most disadvantaged students in America's public school system.
What are they struggling with the most? Identifying, justifying, or writing?
Right now, I think the writing.
Well, I clearly remember receiving the invitation to apply for the grant, and at first blush I thought, wow, this is perfect for us. And then I looked at who we were competing against and I said, I don't know if we stand a chance.
So our entry and opportunity to interact with the Wallace grant has been through the Principal Supervisor grant.
We knew that it was a prestigious designation and it was an honor to be selected, but everyone kind of looked around and said, okay, now what?
We were awarded the grant, and that enabled us to begin to grow the department of the Office of Schools, which are primarily our principal supervisors, and provide them with smaller networks of schools to support. We provided a lot of professional development and training in order to continue to grow their instructional leadership capacity so they, in return, could better support building administrators.
This is just obviously just a perfect example of what they do, is they fund districts to engage in a multi-year research-based process whereby we learn from one another, we collect data, we interact with one another multiple times throughout the year.
There were a lot of questions about our district as a system, our direct supervisors, how we worked as principals, how we worked with our supervisor. And throughout some of that questioning, I understood the Wallace grant to be something that focused our district as a whole.
The Wallace funds allowed us to create a solid foundation in investing in the Marzano instructional framework and the Marzano leadership framework, so that we had a shared vision for what effective instruction was, shared language, and then it went way beyond that as well to helping support those who are supervising our principals to be effective in that role.
Yeah, I thought she masterfully tried to build sort of coaching capacity with the kids, knowing that that's the long game, is because she can't be everywhere. They have to be effective with each other.
Right. We engage in best practices, but we also engage in the most innovative practices. What are you doing differently now to create leadership pipelines in your district so that you're not just guessing at why this leader would be the best leader for this building or this district position, but that you actually have a deliberate and purposeful pipeline whereby you're growing leaders, you're attracting leaders to the profession, and you're putting the most talented individuals into a specific position for a specific reason to have impact on the students and families and staff that we serve.
If we say we value instructional leadership, then we need to put our resources and our supports behind that. And so what the Wallace grant has done is it's helped us move away from seeing the principal or the principal supervisor as the manager and allowed them to be true instructional leaders while also managing the day-to-day whirlwind that just exists in all schools.
We have 7 principal supervisors, 4 at the elementary level and 3 at the secondary level. And so when looking for a principal supervisor, yes, we want someone that has had experience in the role of principal. And yes, we want to look for someone that has instructional leadership or leadership experiences, but also someone that is a collaborative leader, someone who's a reflective leader, someone who needs to be more directive at times, and knowing when you need to be more supportive, knowing when you need to push a little bit more.
Other responsibilities truly are evaluating principals as well as coaching principals. That's our key component right now, is we are coaching our principals. We are side by side in classrooms with them. So really all of our principal supervisor duties truly get down into building-based work, coaching, evaluating, and serving and supporting, growing their professional development in order for them to impact teachers, which in turn impacts students.
So I was thinking, like, how can I make this concrete and kind of bring this home in terms of where does Action Board fit in, where does school-directed monitoring fit in? My responsibility in that role is to support the leaders in all of our middle schools to help them continuously grow as instructional leaders. That's the primary role. Obviously, they need to be strong managers as well, but the primary goal is to help them be stronger instructionally.
The first thing we're looking for is learning targets that are accessible for students. That could be in the binders, that could be posted on the wall. The second thing is, are the students ready and prepared to work together? And then when they're released to work together, what is the level of their conversations? Does the taxonomy stay at a comprehension level, or do we get to the analysis level? That's our biggest push right now, is that our students are not just comprehending, but they're being asked to go above and to actually analyze their work.
Each one of my principal supervisors has a network of 10 buildings, and so I go out to the buildings a lot with them and conduct observations, provide them coaching and feedback in regard to the support that they're providing for building principals and their leadership teams.
I spend the majority of my week in the buildings looking at the action board, seeing what their focus, what they've determined as a focus, and then I'm coaching around that and you know, helping them to refine that focus if it's not maybe where it should be. And then after we look at the actions again, it's crossing into the classrooms to see that that's being implemented.
But it's kind of that mindset where they are there to help you move forward. They're not there to say, yep, nope, yep, walk out. You know, They're like, okay, what are you seeing? What's changed here? They're talking to us when they come in the room, and that helps a ton. You know, no teacher, like, if people standing in the back of the room and they're just like, just watching you, that is nerve-wracking, but they're not really doing that. They're coming in, they're talking to the kids, they're talking to the teacher. It makes a huge difference.
Because when you have a team of people and the decisions are being made by a group of people and not just me, that's when the shift starts changing in your building. That's when you go from not good instruction to great instruction.
With my coaching, it's also shifted from, you know, just coming and spending time in a conference room and, you know, what does the principal need and how are things going? So from those general questions down to very focused instructional leadership. And so, you know, when I'm here, we spend just a few minutes with the principal or whichever building I'm in, looking at their actions, and then we are out in classrooms looking for implementation of the actions.
When we go into classrooms, the number one thing we would look for in the past was, are all kids in seats? Are they all working, or are they all doing something? Now the first thing we check on is standard. Do we see a standard represented? What are we teaching? Is there a target? And then also, how engaged are the students? And we're talking actively engaged rather than passively engaged.
And I think through the training that we've had and the work that we've done, you know, we're going into the classroom and taking a little bit more of a critical look at what's happening.
In so many districts across the country, principals are sort of the forgotten role. We expect everything of them. And they wear a number of hats in the building, but we don't always intentionally provide them with training, support, PD, coaching to do the job really, really well and to continue to grow in their craft.
Principals typically think of their supervisor as an evaluator, and all of a sudden we had to get used to the idea that your supervisor was also your coach. Your supervisor is also somebody who's got some skin in the game with you. This relationship is so trusting that I feel like I can be open, I can share my fears, I can share my vulnerability. I won't receive judgment, but support. It's really a cool thing.
We still ask a lot of good reflective questions, but there's just a lot of conversation that takes place, again, about what are the opportunities and how are we coaching that, and then what are the celebrations that we're seeing in the classrooms.
But it's a weird shape and sometimes different color. All right, you guys think you can try one together?
Yeah.
Let's do this. I'll read the next question.
We go out and process a little bit here. So I would wonder, how is he monitoring for the things that he's focusing on? So what evidence does he have?
Even some things, even like you said, when they didn't turn. And so a lot of times we'll do a day where we go in and check things, and then the instructional coaches and I come back together and we really talk about what we saw, and then make those decisions of what we need to do tomorrow to support these teachers to continue to grow them.
And what's required of supporting teachers and coaching and celebrating teachers are leaders that have courage to stand up and say, this is who we are, and we're about instruction, and we're about equity and access for all students and all families. And that's never been done before, especially at a global scale across the country, United States. And I think our students and our teachers and our families are asking for that. And so this is where education is going. And we're excited in Des Moines to be a part of that conversation and to be leaders in that conversation.
The first two are two that I think most people in here should be able to do in their groups and their teams. What's that mean when I say you can work in your teams?
Work with the people in your group.
Yeah, work with the people in your group. Use all those brains in your group. Why?
Understanding why we team in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
A knowledge creation economy necessitates the need for people to be able to work across job functions and things of that sort.
Okay, so we have mixed ideas within groups. Okay, so I'm going to give you a chance to talk in your groups again and see if you can all come up with an agreement.
So something that's interesting, I think, that, like a coachable moment would be if there was even one card per table that had the success criteria on it. Yeah. I think that could be helpful.
What was your group talking about?
How do we leverage teachers who are doing it well? And maybe it's just, some of it is just articulating her vision. Well, and I bet she could probably do a really good job of defining or explaining what it means to team, for kids to team well, right? And so I think as a teacher, you have to be able to define that really, really well before you can then expect kids to be able to do that. I'm thinking that she probably has made a pretty good investment of time in getting kids to a place where they can work like that.
And I feel like the environment in there is in such a place where, like you said, there's just still evidence to suggest that she's actually put in that time. As I was looking at the groups and looking at some groups were mixed gender, some were not. And is that, how did she determine those groups?
We're observing what's happening with students, and the through line is even less about what's the teacher doing. The through line really is what's the student experience? What's the evidence that the student is learning? What's the evidence that the student's needs in this moment are being met?
And so we're trying to move from a situation where kids say, what are we going to do today, to what are we going to learn today? There's a very big difference between the two. And we're trying to make this shift away from schooling to educating. You know, so schooling is a very regimented and predictable, unengaging process, where educating is a very inclusive and active process that involves students in the process.
So as you do that, could you draw a little observation of what you observed?
Yeah, we could. Okay.
I'll stop and check back with you guys.
It says, is it sunny in the United States as it is in Mexico? We said yes. So let's do United States and Mexico, because I know you're both from there.
I don't know if you actually see the young lady over there standing up. Yeah. Ariana.
Guys, focus on talking.
Her facilitation skills are unbelievable.
They're phenomenal.
Absolutely remarkable. And her ability to try to get all the kids involved, asking some pointed questions, some probing questions, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So what are we observing right now? It would get as much sunlight. So could we draw a globe and like what we're doing right now? What do you think you saw? Come on, explain.
We can draw a globe.
We can?
After that put flashlight shining the light.
Yeah, correct. So let's
Perfect. One of the things that I have picked up on in each of the groups so far is that because of the structured facilitation of each of the team leaders, they were able to generate consensus for their answers pretty quickly.
Esau, do you agree with us?
Oh yeah.
Gabriel, do you agree? Okay, so we all agree.
It's this idea of empathy and compassion. It's the social emotional learning piece that is derived out of structure in terms of the teacher's prep for the classroom, so that students begin to support and love one another within the room. They take care of each other, both socially, emotionally, but also academically.
Ariana, when they were choosing which countries they were going to compare, she goes, well, let's choose Mexico, because I know you two are from Mexico.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're like, yes.
Yeah. It's the kids doing the work. The teacher is really that person monitoring and making sure that they get the lesson started, but it really has to be them moving through it. And then the teacher is kind of relieved a little bit to monitor. And then once we started to see that shift, having those conversations with them on the spot, hey, what do you notice about Tommy over there? Well, I noticed that Tommy didn't meet the standards, so here's what I'm gonna do next. They could tell you exactly what they're gonna do.
Working in groups, like together, it really gives you the opportunity to build friendships and for better learning, because you get to see how other students are learning. You get to see their insight, and sometimes the students know how to explain it better than the teachers.
I'm gonna have, let's see. Oh, I love the way these two are talking together.
Teachers get very nervous when we come in, but we're still battling that history. I always call it fighting history. You know, what they're used to. If a supervisor's coming in, they're looking for something, and is it a gotcha? Now we're really evolving that into collaborative coaching conversation for our growth as well.
It was overwhelming at first, and I think what my teachers wanted, because sometimes we would talk, because we're discussing what we're seeing about, are we on the same page? Are we calibrated? Do we see the same target? It wasn't about the teacher, it wasn't about the kids, but they were so self-conscious. They're like, what are they talking about? They wanted to know. And so that was one thing that my teachers asked, is like, if you're gonna have a conversation in there, can you please involve me as well too?
Every once in a while there'd be a couple students that were kind of nervous, just because that's who they are. It's pretty easy to prep them to be like, hey, people are coming in today, they're gonna be watching me, and they're gonna be seeing how smart you are. So excited for them to see how smart you are.
You just came in, make sure you sign the blue board so I know that you're here.
And students understand that we're here for good reasons. We're spending lots of times in teachers' classrooms that are really doing the type of adaptive work that we need for our students to not just be good, but to be great.
The first time the administrators and the principal walked into the classroom, it was a little weird. We thought we were in trouble, like we did something bad, we weren't learning correctly or whatever. But as it started to progress, we noticed they were just trying to see how the classrooms were going and how things were going on, how we need to learn better. So it became a pretty normal thing. Sometimes we don't even notice they're there.
But now, not a kid bats an eye, not a teacher. They're almost sad when we come into the building and we don't go to their room.
Good morning, my man. Liking it, liking it. Hi, honey, how are you today?
I didn't ask anyone to do it.
I hope that I have the same relationship with teachers that I have with my principal supervisor, that teachers feel like they can be vulnerable, they can ask questions, they can share their concerns and their wonderings.
This is the first time we've done this.
First time?
Yes.
Okay. So half and half, what does that mean?
I think that they'll get half of them right and half of them wrong.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a complex text.
It is a super, yeah.
The thing that we're the most excited about being administrators at North is that we have strong relationships with the students, and that doesn't happen if you're handing out discipline. It doesn't happen if you're calling students out on their faults. How it happens is like you talk to them in Algebra 2 class about Algebra 2. You follow up with them 3 days later about, hey, I saw you work on that problem and you were struggling. How are you doing now? Have a great day.
You too.
We can have those authentic conversations with students. Hey guys, how we doing?
Where's it at? Where's it at? How's their day? How's their day? Good morning. There are students there that we have seen 6 years ago now to most recent that are in the Dream to Teach program. And they're not just saying, oh, I look up to my teacher. They're seeing the true impact of what they want to do. I have a specific little girl that we have to take a selfie every time I'm at the building, and we go in the classroom and it's going to happen. Whoop, I'm going to flip it, don't I? I do it wrong every time, don't I? She wants to be a teacher in order to help serve her kids because she was a refugee, and so she wants to help serve and support her community. And it's not because, you know, back in the day, I want to be a teacher because I love teachers. No, she truly has a focus and a drive to impact and better the world through education. We're focused on Trend Tracker, but I think we're going to look at probably learning targets and alignment, target task alignment.
So should our view of it shift in light of changing times? I think one of the things that I felt like you were struggling with yesterday was, you know, is the action board, like, is it the 20%?
I would say it's a relationship where they know and expect to be challenged. They know that data is a very big part of what they should be doing, and a big part of what I do in terms of determining how effective they are as leaders and where their opportunities are for continuous growth.
Everything is really focused on data, and it's monitoring every single day. Data is a dipstick, so you dip it in and you see where you're at right now. It's not going to be something that you sit on for a month. You make the change, you shift, you do what you need to do, so that way tomorrow you can start getting those better results.
The daily learning gap is what contributes and creates the yearly learning gap for students. And so this work has absolutely opened our eyes and created opportunities for us to be intentional around our classroom visits and observations, to have in-the-moment conversations with teachers around closing the daily gap for students.
There are lots of people talking about disproportionality and the achievement gap that exists between certain student groups. And so while we haven't had the level of success that we want, we are taking that challenge head on. So there are a number of things that I could point to that would qualify Des Moines Public Schools to be in the conversation of school districts that are really trying to reform and get different outcomes for each and every student in the system.
Good morning. How are you today? Good.
So I think one of the keys to our success these last several years is to absolutely find that early win and look for the opportunity to engage leaders in our district around this work of the Principal Supervisors Initiative by feeling and experiencing success. And so that early win is incredibly important.
And so success for me, I think, is having leaders in our schools who have a growth mindset, who realize that it's a continuous journey, leaders who lead with equity as a priority. Those are probably some of the things that I would identify as success. I think the byproduct of that will be teachers who are better positioned to be successful in the classroom. And when teachers are better positioned to serve the kids, then ultimately we get the end result that we want.
The changing dynamic of the role of the principal supervisor in Des Moines, it's just been super profound in so many ways, but it also has allowed us to examine and assess kind of where we go next. And without question, where we continue to evolve and reflect on is the opportunity to transform our central office and looking for the opportunities to serve differently and be more efficient and more effective.
I think that another key learning for us through this process is that we have to create central office culture and operationalize this notion of collaboration.
Having that common vision makes that collaboration more meaningful because we're all working toward the same end goal. We also have individuals who are willing to put egos aside and make it about students.
Our decisions, our collective and collaborative decisions to invest in a common language of leadership and instruction is yielding some results right now. We're still not there, and we still have a long way to go, but we're excited about where we're at and the opportunity that exists before us this year and the years to come.
As we've been learning and growing and developing, we are so fortunate to have received that grant because it's completely transformed the work that we do in a wonderful way for kids.
When kids become the center of what we do, those other things that have traditionally gotten in the way of collaboration start to diminish.
You know, the only way in this country that we're going to truly change lives is to look at it through the lens of each and every student. And so we've changed in the course of just a few years from really an adult-centered culture that wasn't so much about learning but was maybe about the actions of the adults to hyper-focused on the student and the classroom interaction. And the only way we could do that is through the grant.
Being a part of that whole PSI initiative with Wallace has really been transformative for us. It's to a large part helped shape the culture that we have in the district now because it wasn't just what I and my team was talking about. We were actually supporting that with real resources and having tangible movement in those initiatives that people could actually see month over month, year over year. And so I really don't think we could have gotten to the place where we are now without being involved with the Wallace Foundation.
We've engaged in this work intentionally because we believe in our mission and in our vision in Des Moines Public Schools. We exist so that students graduate with the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful at the next stage of their lives. And we take that very, very seriously. And what is absolutely inherent in that statement is that students must experience equitable access and outcomes day in, day out in Des Moines Public Schools. To achieve that will allow us to be the model of urban education. And that's our vision, that Des Moines schools will be the model of urban education in the United States.